Next up is no stranger to the stage. It's Robert Mace. He's the Executive Director of the Meadow Center for Water and the Environment at Texas State University. Go Bobcats. This year we've asked him to come and talk about some results of a study he did on correlative rights, or what he likes to call correlative allocations, and how they can be applied to any geological setting in the state. So please join me in welcoming Robert to the stage.
So similar to what Vanessa said, this presentation was submitted and approved long before kind of the recent drama we're seeing and the recent discussions about, is the rule of capture still a rule or not? Do we need to do something different? And so I think this is timely. It was fantastic to see the judge this morning and hear his thoughts as well as this discussion before. Again, I'm going to talk about correlative rights, correlative allocations. I'll explain why I say correlative allocations instead of rights in a bit. This is some work we did at the Meadow Center with funding from the Hershey Foundation, which has a big interest, particularly in the hill country, but in water issues in general across the state, including groundwater. There's a full report available for free at the Meadow Center webpage called Coupled Correlative Allocations for Groundwater Management in Texas, Overview, Examples, and a Hypothetical conversion. And I'm not going to talk about the hypothetical conversion, more want to talk about the overview and some examples, and maybe argue like why districts might consider correlative allocations, particularly coupled to their desired future conditions as a way of protecting fair share. I should also note that there's a lot of y'all, and the rules are always changing, and I know rules have changed. So this is a snapshot from when we did this study, really kind of towards the end of late last year. So don't be offended if you're like, we don't do that anymore. It's just a snapshot. I was trying to think of a non-groundwater way to describe correlative rights, and it struck me, particularly with the recent death of Brian Wilson, this Surf City song by Jan and Dean. Does anybody know what I'm talking about in terms of like how this relates to correlative rights? Right, 2 girls for every boy. There's like, right, Surf City, here we come, 2 girls for every boy. I was a little concerned that might be sexist, so I asked my wife about it. And she pointed out that the correlative right kind of goes both ways. There's 2 girls for every boy, there's half a boy for every girl. And in her opinion, that was too much. But if that was the way it had to be, she would like her half carefully carved off with a chainsaw. So, but that's a correlative right. You got one thing and it correlates to another thing. And in groundwater, it's often an acre correlating to a certain amount of acre feet per year that can be produced, such as 1 acre, you're allowed to produce 2 acre feet per year. That's a correlative right or an allocation. Oh yeah, there we go. So again, there's our acre, we've got groundwater, and you're allowed to produce a certain amount on a per year or annual basis. Can't pump it all in 1 year. You have a right or ability to pump a certain amount. So again, there's correlative rights where I think it's very strongly, your right is very strongly defined and associated with your surface acreage. Sometimes that's actually called reasonable use or part of the reasonable use doctrine. The judge kind of talked a little bit about reasonable use and correlative rights. Reasonable use says that your use of the resource of the aquifer beneath your property is reasonable with respect to your property. So if you have more property, you could have more use. If you have a smaller piece of property, you have less use. You couldn't, under reasonable use doctrine or pure reasonable use doctrine, be a city, buy a small piece of land and pump a bunch of water out. That would not be considered reasonable, compared to other users in the area. I'm using the term correlative allocations because as we were doing this research, I became uncomfortable with saying things are correlative rights. Just because, and it'll become clear as I kind of describe what a number of y'all are doing. There's no criticism, y'all are doing what you're doing. But it's not necessarily a right. It's more of an allocation. It's a little mushy. It can change. So I've just kind of gone with the term correlative allocations. But I will slip and say correlative rights as we go through this conversation. History, like my impression is correlative allocations probably started in the High Plains. That's where many of our early districts were formed. It's really difficult to locate historical documents to nail it down. I did find in the High Plains Groundwater Conservation District, which has a long history of putting out monthly newsletters, I did find a reference there of a concern about city wells on small pieces of land compared to farmers with larger pieces of land. In their same monthly newsletters later, I found them refer to the Panhandle Groundwater Conservation District, where they passed a rule May 26, 1977, to limit production based on acreage. So this is the early, I'm not saying it's the earliest, but this is the earliest I could find. And this was the good old days, 10 acre feet per acre you could produce in the Panhandle Groundwater Conservation District. Now looking through all of the, and I looked through all y'all's rules to see how you use or don't use correlative allocations. And what I found was 60% of districts, 59 in total, do some sort of correlation. And a lot of times they correlate a maximum groundwater production to acreage. And I say maximum there because and we'll see that often these correlative allocations are decoupled or don't relate back to the desired future condition in the model available groundwater numbers. Those allocations range from 0.04 to more than 90 acre feet per year. So somebody's beaten the old Panhandle district on their correlative allocations. The median value is 1.5 acre feet per acre per year, which I did not find that surprising. 25% of districts that have a correlative allocation is less than half a foot per acre per year, acre foot per year per acre. 25% is greater than 3, and then 10% of y'all that have correlative allocations have allocations greater than 8 acre feet per year per acre, which is a lot of water. So also, groundwater districts are a great incubator for ideas on how, different ways of how to regulate the resource. And so y'all have different factors that are included when you do a correlative allocation approach. So some of y'all, depending on the crop, you had a different correlative allocation. That's actually a strong reason, it's why it's not really a correlative right per se. It just kind of depends on what you're doing. There's escape clauses, so you may have a correlative allocation, or some of y'all have a correlative allocation, but you leave space for an unforeseen circumstance that allows the board to overrule whatever that allocation is in a special circumstance. Some are time-based, so it just kind of depends on periods of time. There's different correlative allocations. There's historic use versus new use, where the older users have a different correlative allocation than the newer users. Some of y'all deal with disparities between municipal users and agricultural users by just simply having different values for public water utilities than for farmers. Some of y'all completely exempt public water supply wells from the correlative requirements. Sometimes it's based on well depth. The deeper your well is, the bigger allocation. Water quality, some of y'all have a different allocation for brackish groundwater than you have for fresh groundwater from the aquifer. And then sand thickness, which we'll talk a little bit more about in a bit. So lots of different, a lot of creativity, a lot of districts doing different things to try and figure out what they want. So here's my heteronormative representation of whether or not correlative allocations are coupled to desired future conditions. And what I mean by coupled is that whatever the correlative allocation is, if everybody who has a correlative right to access the resource uses their right or their allocation, it's going to be equal to the modeled available groundwater number. In other words, it will achieve the desired future condition, assuming that the groundwater availability model has provided an accurate projection of what the impacts are. And so you can see here, there's not as many districts that couple their desired future conditions to their correlative allocation. So 5 districts do. I guess I have a subtle message there based on the demeanor of these couples. So I'm just provide a few examples. One is the Guadalupe County Groundwater Conservation District. This is the district that couples their allocations to sand thickness, which is the only district that does this. It is coupled directly to the desired future condition. This is for the Carrizo. And then they were kind enough to kind of share their allocation database with me so I could calculate an acre foot per acre. And so you get a distribution of somebody, barely having enough to wash the cat on the left, and then on the top end, maybe a little bit more, close to 1 acre foot per year per acre. And so the way they do it is they have a map of sand occurrence across the district, and then based on how much sand you have underneath your property, thickness of the sand, then the model available groundwater number gets proportionally distributed across the district. They also allow new information, better information on sand thickness, to go in and essentially do a reallocation based on the better science. So again, even there, it's like you get a correlative allocation, but it can change as the science gets better. So you might have a certain amount today, less tomorrow, or maybe more tomorrow when the district does this allocation. Brewster County Groundwater Conservation District, way out in West Texas, actually has an equation in their rules that has a water allocation factor that ties to the modeled available groundwater in there, minus the existing use, which includes exempt use. Future use is kind of like near future use with permitted uses, and then acreage that's over the aquifer. So again, this is ensuring that whatever gets permitted is such that the total permits do not exceed the modeled available groundwater number, thereby increasing the chances the district can achieve its desired future conditions. So these are districts that are tying their permits or their usage, in this case is permits, to achieving the desired future condition. And then Post Oak Savannah, has an approach where it has a maximum allowable permitted production, 2 acre feet per year per acre. However, as Gary mentioned, there's a haircut approach. So as more people come online, there'll be a haircut to ensure that that overall production doesn't exceed the modeled available groundwater amount. And then, as was also discussed in the previous session, because they have a defined right, they have the ability for people to participate in an aquifer conservancy program and benefit from not pumping their water or not leasing it to someone else. But there are some concerns with this. Call it magnanimous. Is there enough? Bandera County does not do a coupled correlative allocation. But I'm throwing this up here as a hill country aquifer. It's not an extremely productive aquifer. This is not a Carrizo-Wilcox. But it's also a little sobering to go through. Now they do have a correlative allocation, a maximum limit of 1 acre foot per acre per year. So that's your limit, which you could pump. Area of the counties, 791 square miles. If everybody gets a permit on the maximum allocation, that's a little more than 500,000 acre feet per year can be pumped. Anybody here think you can pump 500,000 acre feet a year out of the Trinity Aquifer in the Hill Country? Yeah, I didn't think so. Now, if they did a coupled allocation, coupled their correlative allocation to the desired future condition, you get less than 10,000 acre feet per year. That is not a lot of water. That's 0.018 acre feet per year per acre, which is about 0.11 gallons per minute or 8.4 teaspoons a minute. I know dippers that can produce more than that. Now, let me be clear, Bandera County doesn't do this coupled allocation. I just put this up as, this can be a challenge, because when you take your MAG and distribute it correlatively across the area over the aquifer, it might be a very small number. On the other hand, this is not a terribly productive aquifer. And so if everybody is using their private property right to access water, there's going to be problems. And we are seeing issues with that. Opportunities from using a correlative allocation approach, it does set a cap on production, which is the best estimate of how much you can pump and achieve the desired future condition. Creates a market, so once you've got this cap, people can buy and sell water rights and allocations. But you should talk to Kelly about some unintended consequences that pop up from that as the wheelin' and dealin' starts rolling. Offers opportunities for conservation, as we saw in Post Oak Savannah. Provides a fair share. I mean, I think when I asked the judge, and maybe he didn't fully understand my question, but when I asked the judge, is there any other way to do it? I think he said he didn't know of another way of achieving fair share than a correlative allocation, a correlative right. You can achieve the desired future conditions, certainly better than letting folks get permits for as much as they want, and letting them pump as much as they want. And then, as the judge mentioned this morning, you got to be thinking as a district how you defend your decisions in court. And I would argue that if everybody has a fair share, they have a correlative allocation, I bet you're going to do well in court defending yourself. I'm just a mere hydrogeologist. Little aside here, my geological friends will tell me, you can't do this in karst. Baloney, you can do this in karst. There's many examples. There's districts on limestone karst aquifers that have correlative allocations. The Edwards Aquifer Authority's original allocation was 2 acre feet per acre for irrigated agriculture, if they were historically using it. Again, karst aquifer. And again, a number of districts do it. So it's not to say you shouldn't try to work in maybe some more geologic information to help in the correlation. To justify the correlation, but I think there's an argument to be made you don't have to do that. So kind of end with some advice. Like if you're intrigued by correlative allocations, I wanted to share with you a couple action figures as opportunities. So this is the Kelly Cochran Guadalupe County Groundwater Conservation District action figure. We've got the Texas Water Code there. We were having a discussion earlier, is that a plate of potatoes? It's supposed to be a plate of barbecue, because groundwater and barbecue go hand in hand. We've got that fair share and that pile there, it's a pile of rice. Gabe Collins from Rice University kind of helps set that district up with this correlative approach. There's the Bible, because it's always good to have prayer when you're managing groundwater in Texas. And then there's some geek down there, calculating out the sand. So this is approach so if you want to do this, and if your pumping is below your MAG or not too much above your modeled available groundwater number, your MAG, then maybe doing this direct correlative allocation approach works. You don't have to have sand thickness. You can do it by acreage. Historically, like across the country, and including across Texas, you don't have to have the geologic information. I think Ed McCarthy's right, though. Ideally, you try to bring some of that in. In some cases, you may have to bring that in based on the geologic example that he provided. But this might be an approach to consider. And Kelly's here, and you can go talk to her at break. And then we got the Gary Westbrook action figure here. Again, we got the barbecue. You got to have an attorney. got the water code. There's a younger, better-looking Steve Young in the lower right-hand corner there, running the simulations and whatnot. But this is an interesting approach because what Gary does is, and Post Oak Savannah does, is they allow people for the time being to pump more than their correlative allocation would be if the water was fair shared across everybody. But as more people come online and use their private property right to produce water, then he provides a haircut over time. So this might be an approach that if the pumping cat is out of the bag in your district and you want to do a correlative allocation approach, that maybe this might be a way to consider doing that going forward. And then finally, I'll end with this slide. This is a bit of my opinion here, but it's like if you don't have rules or an approach that seeks to achieve the desired future condition, you're essentially operating as a rule of capture with speed bumps. Because we're seeing this with districts that don't have strong rules to protect fair share, arguably protect private property rights, where they get caught in a trap of having to continuously give permits out and continue to raise the desired future condition or create more permissive desired future conditions to raise the modeled available groundwater number. I'll agree with Ed. Ed talked about he didn't use the words reverse engineering, but there's some districts do the reverse engineering. On the other hand, I think there's districts that honestly have a hydrologic-based goal that they want to achieve, but they can't because they don't have a way to say no. And correlative allocations is a way, I believe, to say no. And so with that, happy to take any questions. I told the folks up front that the only reason I come to this conference, which is not true, is to get the latest sledge koozie, right? And I first pulled it out of my bag and I was like, well, this one's a bummer, right? It's like, but then I was like, there must be a hidden message in here. And I think there is, because you'll notice there's RWPG, Regional Water Planning Group, there's GAM, Groundwater Availability Model, and then SOA, State Office of Administrative Hearings. So anyways, I think there is a subtle message. Be careful with that koozie. Thank you very much.